This is Popping the Bubble with hosts Sandra Ponce de Leon and Pete A. Turner.
This is Will Bunker with GrowthX.
And this is Sean Shepard with GrowthX and GrowthX Academy, and you're listening to Popping the Bubble.
Hey, Will and Sean. It's great to have you guys on Popping the Bubble. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so just to begin, would love to just find out, well, actually, before we begin, I just want to say what amazing entrepreneurs you both are. Will, you were the previous co-founder or founder, correct me if I'm wrong, of Match.com, and now you guys have joined up. You're also an entrepreneur, Sean. How did you guys meet up, and how did you decide to found the GrowthX Academy?
We met at a trade school that we would call a startup MBA program. Will had a previous fund with 65 companies in it, I think.
Yep.
I developed a program to train people who wanted to work in non-technical roles in startups, sort of a startup MBA, if you will, called Tradecraft. And as part of the curriculum, students would work on real projects with real companies. And we're doing that again now with GrowthX Academy. And Will brought his companies in as projects. And what we saw was a significant increase in the value of those companies and traction growth in a very short period of time through the work that was being done using my curriculum and methodology and the students from the program on Will's companies. And we looked each other in the eye and just said, we're leaving a lot of value on the table here. Maybe we should think about another way of doing this. So we went off and started a fund.
Absolutely. And the thesis of the fund is that we've got an in-house team that are experts in setting up the sales processes and the sales team for startups. And with a subset of the companies that we invest in, we will do an intensive hands-on process where we take them through finding product market fit, messaging, ideal customer profile, and see how fast we can accelerate their growth.
Right. So do you only work with B2B companies primarily, or also some consumer companies?
We've done some consumer companies, but our expertise lies more in the higher lifetime value customers, which tends to be B2B.
Got it. Very cool. So how do you guys differ from a standard incubator or accelerator that's in the market now, like a Y Combinator?
Sure. And by the way, for the record, we think all the accelerators and incubators are awesome and should exist. Mm-hmm. Anybody who's doing a startup can't do it alone and could always use the help. That said, unlike traditional accelerators that are in business to help you develop product and raise money, ours is focused on helping you market your product and make money. So we look at companies who already have a product with early customers and early revenue and a real opportunity to grow them exponentially, and apply our expertise on market development, which is around typically B2B growth.
And it's not a batch process. So we can take on maybe 1 to 2 companies a month new and then work them through the process. And it's a multi-month process, very hands-on, very intensive.
And they have to be in the portfolio to apply for the program. Typically, we make an investment first. Once they're in, then they can apply for the accelerator program.
Interesting. So what are some of the successes that you've seen coming out of the program? Anything that you can talk about?
I mean, Glam Street's a great example of someone who's really done well. Do you want to take them through that?
Yeah. Female founder from Uruguay who built a virtual makeover technology that started out as really a gamified consumer app. But we were able to help them get traction in converting it into a business model for business application, where they, through in-app, in-store, and online, help cosmetic brands as well as their retailers apply makeup in a virtual sense in the most realistic and accurate way we've seen to date to sell more product. And they've received tremendous traction with major brands and major retailers in 6 short months. We went from 1 customer to dozens and pretty close to break even. And now they can control their own destiny, whether or not they want to continue to raise or grow organically. They now have that option. So we're pretty proud of that.
And as part of the process, the last thing we have to do is replace ourselves. So, right. We brought in Erica. She's awesome sales person that's really pushing the ball forward and, carrying it down the field. Because if you don't do that, then the minute you stop helping, then the activity stops.
Yeah, our job is to teach you how to fish, not give you the fish.
Right. Yeah, that's great. You see a lot of startups, obviously, and a lot of founders. So what do you think is it that makes for a great founder?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of qualities, and it's funny. The business is such that there are many things that are necessary but not sufficient to succeed. So you can be 80% of the right stuff and still fail miserably, or unfortunately, given the chaos of a startup, you could do everything right and still fail. I would say two key qualities come to my mind. One is grit, determination, because you are going to be wrong 90 to 95% of the time, and you just have to keep trying until you're not wrong. And then the second one is mental flexibility. Can you accept the input that you're getting from the universe and change your plan based on the data that you have versus what you wished were true?
Mm.
Yeah. The longer we're on this earth, the more we focus on the people and less on the product. That said, we are very mindful that it's markets that create value, not products. And we pay very close attention to the market side of the business, what the market feedback and the data tells us about what is possible. I completely concur with everything Will says, of course. I would only add professional humility to that.
Yeah.
And that means that they do view feedback as a gift, that they are humble enough to accept and coachable enough to accept our help in achieving their goals.
It's interesting. There's kind of the myth of Steve Jobs, because I don't even think Steve Jobs was actually this way. But the myth is that, you can design a product or service in your head, be 100% right. And if you could just build it and show everyone, they would agree with you.
Right.
And that's just not true. And certainly not true for beginning entrepreneurs.
Yeah. So I think what you guys are talking about is product market fit, right? And really coming to a strong understanding. So can you just share some tips in terms of how do you know when it's there?
Yeah. I get asked that question a lot. Tactically and practically, I think when inbound interest, the tipping point is when inbound interest exceeds outbound manufactured lead generation. So when I'm getting more people coming to me for my product than I'm going out to find, and I start to have to staff up in a trailing sense as opposed to a leading sense, that coupled with knowing there's a large enough market behind that ideal customer profile, that customer segment, that's when you put the pedal down.
And, tactically, it's when you know how to take $1 and turn it into $5 on a predictable way, and that takes a while to work out all the kinks of, if I do these activities, so many customers will come out the other side.
That's right. All revenue is not created equally, right? So you have to find the predictable, scalable, profitable revenue. Our other partner, Andrew Golder, we call it the 3Ds of revenue, three-dimensional revenue: predictable, profitable, scalable.
Amazing. That's interesting.
I know that both of you guys have talked specifically about, and you just mentioned it a second ago, Sean, talking about people versus product. Talk to me about, how does someone who's entrepreneurial and focused and falls in love with their product and they're passionate and they know what to do, and you guys keep saying, you got to talk to people. You got to interact with people. You have to have, I'm big on culture. You have to have a handle on the culture of your clients, your customers. How does that process go?
Well, unless you're the only customer of your product, then your opinion ultimately doesn't matter that much. It's the marketplace's opinion. And after doing this for 20 years, all I can say is that I am mostly wrong most of the time. And the trick is to get up and keep working on it anyway.
To just be a little less wrong tomorrow than I was today.
How long did it take you guys to learn that lesson? Because that's a learned trait.
My original startup was pretty brutal. I mean, you're standing naked in front of, 100,000 customers a day, and they'll tell you every damn thing you do that's wrong.
Is that Match that you're talking about?
So I started One and Only, which actually took over what was left of Match. Match raised $10 million in San Francisco. They spent the money, and the VC basically yanked the rug out from underneath them, fired the original team, and sold it off. We had the largest site of the 90s in personal space ended up taking over their brand name and their database at the end of the 90s.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that.
It's a complicated story. It doesn't fit on one line.
Right.
I mean, I claim Match because basically, essentially, my company took what was left of it and ran with it. That's why Match is in Dallas, which is where we were located, and not here where they were located.
Right.
That's an incredible story. So to learn that lesson, that humility, having 100,000 people tell you what's wrong with your product every day, that still takes guts, though. I mean, what are some examples of how you dealt with that as that came hitting you in the face?
So I feel like there's a fine balance between you have to be optimistic about your ability to get there, but you have to be realistic and, have humility about the data that you're getting. And that, so what I always say is, I know the outcome I want. I don't care how I get there. And so by not caring about how I get there, I'm able to adapt myself to the feedback, because the path I take is not important as long as the users like what I produce, as long as I get the outcome that I want in the end.
I think the true measure of one's character is not how they act, but how they react. And what you see more often than not is with the winners is they react well to adversity and difficult situations, and the others do not. And in my experience, the longer I do this, the more I recognize that my success is a direct result of those who are helping me be successful. And it's my job to do the same and pay that forward with founders, funders, and students in our academy. Our success is derived from helping other people be successful, and hopefully in an enduring way. And that's, I think, what we pay the most attention to. We have our radar up 24/7. We're mindfully aware of how other people behave and how they respond and react to certain situations. And we use that to inform our decisions about whether or not we want to continue to work with somebody or work with them at all.
Right. Do you think that the humility is something that comes with experiences and with age, or is that just, right now, I think in Silicon Valley, there is such a glamorization of the young founder that just comes out of Stanford or Yale, right? And, they get $1 million to develop their startup. But at that age, can you really be humble?
I think some people are. I mean, depending on, what lessons you've drawn from what's happened to you in life. So I don't think it's necessarily just age. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've certainly met some wonderful, wonderful people that are younger, that truly, walk through life, reacting well to what's happening. So, and I don't know if they've learned it from the way they were raised or just their personalities naturally that way. But I certainly think the idea that, you can be a jackass and it all works out. And in our business, there will always be the outlier that does everything that you would say wouldn't work and it still works anyway, because there's just a statistical spread to outcomes. But I guarantee you it doesn't help you get there.
That's right. Some people will call it the old soul. There's people that just have that old soul, if you will. They come to you with that level of humility, coachability, and willingness to submit to the marketplace and not be in this position of power. We screen for that. No, I certainly was never. It took me 20 years to calm down, getting my ass beat in over and over and over again to realize, look, much like Will said, if I want a certain outcome, I'm going to have to change my behavior. And we never assume intent with folks either, right? Some people are just not genuinely aware of the impact they have on others with the way that they behave. And we now live in a world where people are more afraid to tell you the truth in person than they've ever been. So people can, and generally oftentimes happen, will go through life or for an extended period of time without having any idea about the negative impact of their behavior on others.
That's why I was just texting you, Sean, telling me you hurt my feelings earlier. So that's so that you would know later.
You had a really good story about your brother the other day that you shared with a student where your family wasn't telling you the reality because the way they knew you would react to it. And that was kind of your wake-up call.
Yeah, not my brother, my best friend.
Oh, your best friend. Okay.
My best friend. That was my wake-up call. It was a major thing. And he has since passed away, but he had a problem with alcohol. and he had gotten himself clean, and then apparently he fell off the wagon. No one would tell me until it was too late, until I had to pull him out of a closet. And I said, why? I'm screaming at everybody close to us. Why did you not tell me this? And they all said the same thing. They were afraid because I was too judgmental. I was too blunt. I made him and other people feel small. And I had not realized it to that degree, that it was so bad that it actually impeded my ability to help my friend. And that was my wake-up call.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, that's heavy. So if the one is true, you can be too focused on other things, be too intense. Can you be too empathetic? I've done a lot of work overseas in conflict zones, and the empathy you have to have for everybody is tremendous. But you can also only do so many good things. You can reach an ethical saturation where, despite your best intentions, I'm now shutting up because Will's letting me know he's got something to say.
So I have a dilemma with this because I really found myself drowning in trying to help people after selling my company because I had the resources, had the experience, the reputation, and help me. So there's a great book that was written about this particular topic because they found that the top 10% and the bottom 10% performers in companies were givers. And the book was about what's the difference between top performing givers and bottom performing givers. And the answer was that if you detect that you're interacting with someone who's a taker, cut them off.
What's the name of that book?
Give and Take by Adam Grant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Fabulous
so
book.
once I started following that, a lot of my problems cleared up because if you give to people who reciprocate, and it doesn't have to be reciprocate to you, but just reciprocate in life. Mm-hmm. And then you get rid of the people that just will take until there's nothing left. It's a lot easier to pull it off.
Life becomes a whole hell of a lot easier.
And so I've just become very, very disciplined about doing that.
And my view on that, in addition to that, is simply that you can't help people that don't want help. So we set out to be helpful to everyone. In fact, help is our due diligence. We like to say that, but we actually behave that way. And through that help, we learn everything, not everything, but enough to know whether or not this is a relationship we want to continue to pursue. And we try to not just behave that way here, but we try to behave that way in life going forward. And it's just made things easier on us emotionally, as well as I think professionally.
Yeah, because you had that one company that, you got them initial customer contracts and the person was still basically, it was never good enough, always angry about everything. And, about second time into it, you're just like, I don't think I want to help this person anymore. Thank God we didn't invest.
And that was a hard thing for me. If I was a dinosaur, I'd be a plesiosaurus. I want to please everybody. And sometimes my loyalty bleeds into the empathy that you brought up, right? And I read an article Richard Branson wrote specifically on that topic, that his biggest failure in business was being too loyal for too long to Virgin Records. And the pride of ownership of this idea of him having to shut down the Virgin Records in, it was either Manhattan or in Hollywood, the iconic store. And he held on probably a year and a half longer than the market really wanted him to hold on because of that level of loyalty to it. And I look back on my life and career, and I've done a lot of that. I've stuck things out because I thought that was the right thing to do. And I didn't want to give up on things where other people had already given up. Right, and sometimes you win on that, and sometimes you lose. But emotionally, I'm married with children now, and it's not about me anymore. Right? I've got to give to a lot of folks.
Right. And I think that there's a lot of parallels in what you talk about with founders and founders being so tied to their products that they may not want to see the reality, or when the data is showing them that there is no product market fit, just holding on so tightly, not wanting to pivot. So I think it's interesting that we're having this conversation here.
Well, and that's one of the key reasons that startups fail, is a failure to pivot and recognize that, because of that idea that they don't get my vision, right? I'm going to build this. They just don't get it. They don't understand, because you've created this cognitive founder bias in your head.
Well, when I moved out here, I had spent 3 years on a project, Yo-Yo Brain, which is a flashcard learning site, $500,000 of my own money. and had gotten maybe 1,000 users a month. And we spent $90,000 in a year and a half, and we were already doing $15K a month on the dating site. So, what I learned out of it was I hadn't changed. I was still just as good. I mean, matter of fact, I was a better entrepreneur than I was the first time. I was just working on the wrong thing. And I after that, I'm very militant about, working on things that get traction, because, you've only got so many tries at this game.
Very, very true. Well, I mean, you have lots of tries at the game, right?
Well, it takes about 4 years, and the average lifespan's 80. And you didn't start until you were 20. And so you kind of work it out. I mean, I'm in my late 40s now, and no, that's not old, but there's only so many more shots at the board. Mm-hmm. And so you start going, I want to make sure these shots count because I want to have an impact.
Right. Yeah, you take enough of those shots also, and you get more humbled. So I think that makes you more open to understanding when things aren't going right.
You guys have a program. So Will and I are both veterans. You have a program that deals with veterans and helping to make them more marketable, more transitional. Can you guys talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I don't know if it's a specific vet program quite yet. We're working on that. Helping veterans is important to me. I'm a Navy brat, and Will served obviously in the Marines. And I remember growing up watching the transition my father went through. And it was difficult.
You've had some success. I mean, you graduated 5 before, and you've got 1 in the current class, or 6 before.
Yeah. So I've already had, fast forward to today, I've already had success. We've had successful graduates from my program that are working in, I got 2 in Facebook, got 1 at WalkMe. We've got 1 in the program currently that received a job offer yesterday. Woo-hoo. And we're only 7 weeks into a 12-week program. And I just have seen, I've seen the skills transfer so much better than people ever probably realize from the military to the startup world. And they're outperforming their peers that have come through the program as well.
Why is that, you think?
Well, I think they're coachable as hell, right? They have to be. B, they know how to deal with adversity as well as anybody and respond well to stress. They've had all the right attributes instilled in them from their time in the service.
But also, we try to focus very much on which stage is appropriate to the person, because, you can look at the military and there's a lot of stereotypes. On the one hand, it's a gigantic organization, so it's the biggest company you'll ever work for.
Right.
But on the other hand, if you're out in the field or in a combat type situation, it's as big a startup kind of stress, like you have to react to the environment. There's no right answer kind of thing. And so knowing which side of the military you responded to will tell you, do I want to go to a larger company?
Right.
One that's more organized, better provisioned, and, there's processes. Or did I really like that part where I was out in the field improvising? Because then you probably want to go to an earlier stage startup.
Sure. One of the things I've noticed as I've talked to companies and been in the marketplace for trying to figure out this veteran transition issue is that there's a lot of help in developing the veteran skills, translating them for them so that I, as a veteran, understand what I do. The problem I've seen is that the companies lack the detailed knowledge. Like, I want to hire veterans because they're good at leadership. They get the job, and it's very simple. They lack a detail. And so when I show my resume, I don't even get considered because, well, frankly, here in San Francisco, it's tough for a military audience. I've been told a number of times to take all that off of my resume. So how do we get companies like Facebook, where I've applied and got nothing back? How do we take a company like that and give them the detailed knowledge that these folks are out there, they're knocking on the door, but they don't know how to listen?
So, yeah, well, that actually has nothing to do with being a veteran, with respect. It has everything to do with how you position yourself to a company and how you engage that company. I'll give you a great example. I founded 2 recruiting technology companies and had good success with those companies. I know that space very well. The average recruiter gets 122 applications for a job. They carry 25 to 75 jobs on average, according to the Saratoga Institute, who follows this stuff. The chances of you getting a response by applying through a website or a job board is less than 1%. Has nothing to do with you being a veteran. Did the people that are at Facebook right now apply through the website, through my program? Absolutely not. I taught them a career funnel strategy that taught them how to get to decision makers and apply the sales methodology and the go-to-market methodology of product market fit to person company fit so that they could identify what they love, what they want to do, with whom they want to do it, because companies are just a collection of people, what kind of environment that is, how we transfer the skills that they've already brought to the table, do a gap analysis to backfill what they need to get into those organizations, identify the company's roles and fits associated, and the people responsible for influencing that hiring decision, and then getting them in front of those people. And then the last thing they do is apply through an applicant tracking system. That's my soapbox.
That's powerful. Thanks, man.
And there's a reason we have that kind of placement rate. Right. It has to do with the same reason. That statement, again, not coming at you with this, but I hear this all the time, right? This is a tough town for veterans. Politically, sure, but not with the private sector and employment. I promise you, it's not that way.
That might be true
at all.
But the reality is that there's people that get no response, and they don't have that network. They won't.
I agree with you. Yeah. They get no response. I just want to establish why they get no response. Might be a different reason than what people might think. Is that reason?
I mean, if you apply through a company website, anyone, nobody's going to get a response.
Facebook would never, or any of these companies would never respond to my resume or even Will's. I mean, for what?
God
right?
Help me if I have to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Being a veteran has nothing to do with that. That has to do with not being connected, not having access to the network and the community and being a part of it.
Right. I would say at least 20 to 25% of the program focuses on those skill sets.
Right.
Because we could teach you all the technical knowledge of selling or growth marketing or UX, and you could still not get a job.
Right.
Because you don't know who to communicate it to and how to communicate it to them. And then even beyond that, like, what's the subset of companies that I would be happy at?
If a sales professional sold, let's think about this for a second. A sales or marketing professional sold or tried to attract Facebook the way they apply for a job, do you think they'd ever get a response?
Never.
No. What am I going to do? Let's think about it. Let's walk through what that is. We're going to go to Facebook's website. We're going to click on info at Facebook, and we're going to send them an email. Hi, I have a product I'd like to sell you. Do you think you're going to get a response that's meaningful? Hell no, right? You have another way. You find out who the right people are for the product that you have. You create a value hypothesis, hopefully. You come up with an attraction framework to get them to say, ooh, that's interesting, tell me more. You start the sales process through Convo framework. You build opportunities. You start to build consensus. You identify all the different buyer types, user buyers, economic buyers, technical buyers, champions in the organization, their role, relative influence, budget, authority, need, and timing. You build out an account map and strategy, and you go down that path until there's nowhere left to go. And even then, you're only going to get some percentage to convert of the 100 out that you reach out to, right? Same process. If you treat the career strategy the same way as you treat the sales strategy, you're going to guarantee an outcome. And with us, that outcome is multiple offers from multiple companies in your ideal company profile. No different than how you take a product to market.
And it's funny, I just don't think people treat it the same way. Mm-hmm. And when you do, the results are pretty startling.
Sorry, I get passionate about this.
You should be passionate about it. Heck, I'm passionate about it too.
Well, it frustrates the heck out of me because when I hear that from anyone,
right?
Because they give up based on a false premise and this idea in their head, right? That they don't have access, that this is what I'm hearing. And I know it's lonely and it's an emotional process just trying to find a job, right? And it takes a long time. And we often don't have that emotional support when we're in it. And handling rejection for a human is super hard to begin with. But when you don't get a reply from a company, it really hits you harder because it's not just hitting you emotionally, it's hitting your dreams or what your perceived dreams are. So it's tough. I understand it. I want people to know that there's actually a methodology to get the outcomes that they want.
And in a 12-week program, when do you start working on the job?
Pre-work, before they even get here.
Before they even show up, we start doing the activities that'll lead to the right outcome, because it takes time. If
you were a transitioning military officer coming to the Valley from never being here before, and we've seen this, we've had Naval Academy, Air Force, we've had Academy alums, military officers from all walks of life. It takes months to find the right job anyway. Right? Even if you're militant about it, pun intended, it takes you a while. So what if you actually have a real strategy, right? What if you actually take the time, sit down, stop playing whack-a-mole with your life, and spend 12 weeks in a program that gives you the skills transference, the repackaging, branding, and positioning necessary, and the coaching support and guidance throughout the entire process, emotionally, spiritually, physically, to do this and execute on it. That's the essence of GrowthX Academy and the veteran program.
That's huge and so valuable. I think probably what Pete is reacting to also is that you see a lot of companies that are giving lip service to wanting military personnel in, and they've got this special channel for military to come in through that. And even through when you're applying through those channels is when you don't get the responses that you want. But
that's very true too. Yeah. And I certainly don't want to diminish that at all. I completely appreciate that.
Yeah, your service is unique in the way it approaches things. I mean, I just recently learned that putting your resume out on things like Monster and all of the traditional places, that's dismissed by the people that are doing the hiring. Like, that would have been good to know before anybody transitioned, because you're right. You do have to have a strategy, but the strategy comes from somewhere, from someone. I mean, you guys have a robust program, but you have to be here in San Francisco and then be able to withstand a 3 to 4 to 6 month process, financially. And all of a sudden,
it's tough.
It gets tough. And then, people will say we want to hire a diverse job skill set. Okay. But they never say the word military in that diversity. And yet the military is probably the most diverse company out there. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So there's all these other things where we have to try to educate I've talked to a number of placement type people where they say, yeah, my clients don't ask for military as a discriminator. So that part of the equation also has to get balanced out, because for sure the military person needs to be able to translate what they do. You're right. We have incredible skills. Like, hey, well, today's a 20-hour day. Give me a second. Let me put a dip in, get an energy drink, and let's go. Yeah. Like, what CEO doesn't want that on their side? Like, I cannot fail. This truck's upside down. We got 4 dudes. We have to get it right side up to get out of here. Right. How are we going to solve this problem? Well, there's a stick. And there's a fat guy, and there's a rock, and there's a rabbit, and the next thing and Will, you know what I'm talking about. Yep. You cannot have your vehicle on its side in a combat. You have to move. So there's no CEO that doesn't want that. But how do we give the skill to the company to understand that exists? Running a range is a complicated thing. Doing a combat mission is it's mundane to me. I've done 1,000 missions.
So I would flip it on its head.
Nice.
Because it's hard to change a large entity. It's easier to change an individual. So my feedback would be there's probably a subset process that you could run vets through that would show them how to, build a career funnel, even if they're not here, even if they're not in the program, doesn't really matter. It's more of running it as a process. And I think that's where the failure point is, because, if you think about it, these companies are either successful and making a lot of money, and therefore change is hard because they're already winning, or they're failing, which means they're totally foobar, their hair's on fire, and they're probably not going to change because they're about to die. And so either way, you're kind of, it's hard to produce change in that group of human beings. Mm-hmm. So my guess is it's much easier to educate the individuals, like, here's a way to run a career process that makes sense.
Yeah.
Than it is to try to change Facebook.
Yeah. And one of the best parts about the funnel that you touched on is it depersonalizes the process, because you're managing a spreadsheet, you're managing a CRM, you're managing a funnel of if I put 100 of the right companies in the top, I'm going to get the 5 out of the bottom that I want if I follow all these steps and I do the work. And nobody's better at doing the work than a veteran, right? You just have to give them that piece of it.
I mean, there was a summer I wanted to not farm, and I wanted to work at a factory because I'm an industrial engineer. And so Greenville, Mississippi, I took out the phone book, and I got a job at Vlasic. And if you notice, there's not many letters after Vlasic. Like I called every company from A to V. I didn't make it to Z, but V was how long it took me to find anyone that would give me, a job.
You perfected your process by then.
Yeah.
Well, it's a numbers game.
Yeah.
It truly is. And if you treat it like that, it makes the process a little bit easier to
But there's
swallow.
a lot of other things within that numbers game that can increase your odds dramatically.
Yeah. Well, I think it's, the more you look at everything like that as a funnel, whether it's sales, whether it's funding, whether it's finding a job, I think that, applying that attitude to really anything that you want to accomplish is really the right way to go about it.
Yeah, around here we always say everything's a funnel.
Everything's a funnel. Speaking of that, so what do you guys think is happening right now with the funding environment, and what's going to happen to Silicon Valley and startups? Are we in a bubble?
Well, we've been in a bubble every year since 1995 at least, and probably before that. That's the only time I started paying attention. Silicon Valley's always past its prime. Funding's always hard, except when it's not, and then all the dumb things are getting funded. So there's a lot of cliches about it. I mean, what you can say right now is that we're not in as permissive a funding environment. Mm-hmm. But the hard part is, and I'll talk to entrepreneurs that come, from out of town, they come to Silicon Valley, they moved here, and what they don't realize is that you're not competing against the competition that's on your slide deck. You're competing with the last 50 people that just pitched the person you're talking to. And so when you're in an environment here where there are so many damn good companies and so many damn good ideas and so many good entrepreneurs, that's the competition. Because when I get pitched, I think about the last 50 things I listened to, and I stack rank. And unless you're the top one, I don't move forward. And so it's never as easy as it appears by how many people get funded, because what isn't printed is the number of people that didn't get funded today, because that's a much bigger list.
Huge.
Yeah, I would say I'm not an actor, and I'm certainly not playing one on this podcast.
No kidding.
But I would imagine it's just like that Hollywood thing. If you want to go people who go to Hollywood to be an actor or an actress, only a certain few are able to sustainably find a way to make it. I see the same thing happening in the Valley. Mm-hmm. People come from all over the world to be here because they want to be in this mindset, this culture. They all have something amazing to offer, and some make it and some do not. And I don't know if there's a scientific approach to that. Maybe there's a funnel to that too. We'd have to look at that and explore it. But
I mean, I view it like that scene in Private Ryan where the thing goes down and the bullets start coming in, because I see it every year. Like, you see all these new people roll in and they hit the beach, and not very many of them make it to the top. And the carnage is pretty bad.
That's an incredible analogy. And you guys are doing something I love to think about with this. Same thing with the gold rush. Like, you can go in, be a prospector, and live that exotic life that's got a lot of challenge, and you don't make a whole lot of money necessarily. Some people do. Some people find that vein, and all of a sudden they've got the Comstock motherlode.
But the people who sold the picks and axes built this town.
Oh my! Yeah, the guy that sold all the dragon's teeth for Normandy Beach, right? That guy made a lot of money. The guy that sold buttons made
Levi
$1 zillion.
Strauss.
Yes,
made blue jeans and overalls here for miners.
So you guys are sort of an outfitter, in a sense.
I mean, we've been on both sides of it.
Yeah.
We both stormed the beach.
Right.
I know what it's like. I did make it to the top.
Yeah, for sure.
But, you turn around and you look, and it's just brutal.
Right.
And it's hard to convey that to people when they're riding up in the boat and fixing to jump out, And I met some guys, speaking of that, I met this one guy that had been in 3 landings in the Marine Corps in World War II.
Good grief.
And my thing is, and then I watched Private Ryan, and I was like, okay, I get the first one, because you don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
Like, you're just all psyched up and everything, and then, holy crap. But I'm like, how do you get yourself to do it the second time or the third time?
Yeah.
It'd just be completely insane. So
That's like the Pathfinders. The Pathfinders were the guys that jumped in before the paratroopers to say, here's a light. Try to aim for this light, airplane. So these guys are jumping in at 4 a.m., you know, and with no ability to do anything other than, and if they don't, turn the light on. And if they don't turn the light on, things get bad, you know, and that's if the plane is somewhere near the course where the light might be. Guys, I mean, that's where the Dirty Dozen movie comes from. That's what these guys were. They're also the ones that jumped into the Battle of the Bulge, and they're all like, we're doing it. And like they were literally jumping in where there was no food, no ammo, and no like cold weather provisions.
My grandfather won a Bronze Star at the Bulge.
Yeah.
And he used to tell me the story. All he would say is it was really cold.
Yeah.
That's all he ever said.
And these knuckleheads wanted to jump into like, we have to get there because they were going to be the ones that said, bring the supplies here to this spot, you know?
Incredible.
Yeah.
My movie analogy is Shawshank Redemption. I always say it's you come out here and all of a sudden somehow you end up in prison and you're chipping away for 17 years at a wall only to wade through 400 yards of piss and shit to get to a beach where you sand a boat with an old guy. And that's success.
Yeah. I mean, we met the entrepreneur today, and he's been working on this since 2009, and they're starting to get like massive success.
Yeah.
7 years in.
Right. That's
every overnight success story takes years.
Yeah.
There's a guy that made a movie called The Wrecking Crew. His name is Denny Tedesco. And it's about all the guys in Hollywood who performed all of the music for the Monkees, for the Beach Boys. If you haven't seen it, it's incredible. And he made that movie starting in 1996. And he just sold it last year. So he had to constantly and he had all this mountain of money. Because he had to pay all those people because it's their music, that's all. Yeah. So he had all these problems. So he took that thing on the road and showed it in high school gyms, anywhere where he could sell 100 tickets or 20 tickets. That's where he took it and then created awareness. And it took him 20 years to finally get to the point where this project is now done,
Mm-hmm. And you could probably, in retrospect, get on a whiteboard and draw that funnel about how he got to where he got, right?
Well, I think that's the grit that you were talking about earlier, right? And that's what really, it takes to survive in this town. And, certain also desire, being a glutton for punishment, I think.
Well, and I think you have to be able to move people. You can't do it alone. And the Valley has a very different way. And I would say this to veterans because the command and control structure doesn't work very well here. And
it's funny. The book that I read on that was the best is "Don't Shoot the Dog." And the lady was like, "Do you know why you can't use negative reinforcement with dolphins?" She was a dolphin trainer, and the person said, "No, why?" And she goes, "A 600-pound mammal just swims away." And so, human beings in this valley have plenty of options. Yeah. So if you're a jerk, they'll just go to the next job.
Yeah. So how you deal with others. I keep saying a company is just a collection of other humans. How you interact with those people, how you move them through ways other than force, it will make a huge impact on your ability to be successful here.
When I've seen military units in the most complicated, dangerous environments be successful, and this is sort of my mantra to commanders, is focus on the affect, not the effect. Right. If you can be evocative, if you can create desire for the government you're trying to support, you can work from that point. If you focus on the effect, how many kids that we put in school today, I guarantee you will lose because you aren't changing anything. You're just creating a behavior to measure, and that's it.
It's how you make them feel, remember?
Yes. It's people rarely, there's a Maya Angelou quote. They rarely remember what you say or do, but they never forget how you make them feel. Mm-hmm. This town is all about the human experience. I've started my own show for that, how to talk to humans for that very specific reason.
You did?
Because technology is taking us further apart. It's putting screens in front of us. It's making us more connected, but we control that connection to the degree that we can edit and delete and filter and enhance any part of our experience that we want to deliver to folks, and we can control the hell out of that. You can't control the dynamic of a human interaction. Mm-hmm. And computers don't hang up on you, and they don't lie to you, and they don't say they're going to be there when they're not. They're not rude.
So this is a class that you're giving.
It's actually it's a meetup. It's a meetup.
Series of talks.
It's a series of talks where I'm interviewing people who have who have mastered the skills, the interpersonal skills necessary to talk to humans, because it's a lost art.
Yeah.
Conversation is a lost art.
And it's really the basis of relationships. And I think also another key to success here in Silicon Valley is your relationships, nurturing your relationships and, giving back like what you guys are doing. Switching gears just a little bit, we're talking about the funding environment and the companies that you look at. Are there any particular emerging segments that you're particularly keen on these days?
Well, I'm a very eclectic person in terms of I find many, many, many things interesting. I think, if I look out in the future, it's robotics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, those sorts of things. We're funding some stuff in that area already. One of our coolest companies, and, with all of these, you never know who the winners are going to be, but I think it's interesting what they're doing and someone will do it. They built a robot that's for the ocean. And it swims. And the advantage is you don't have to tether it to a diesel generator. And so it can go do things and put sensors in places that are super expensive to do right now. And it's Aqua AI. They're just super great team. And I just think, if you look out ahead, those things are going to be very commonplace for my children's children, even though they seem completely crazy now. I went and test drove my first Tesla and tried the auto driving things. It's pretty magical.
Really?
It's pretty magical. I'm too cheap to buy one, but I really like the car.
I'm actually, again, always being the market side person, I'm focused on how the market is moving and responding and changing and the power it's acquiring right now thanks to the internet machine. And I love it. I love watching human behavior played out at scale. And I love seeing things like yellow cab being completely disrupted before they even had a chance to corrupt the market's opportunity to grow it, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense.
Okay.
It's got an ice pick in its neck and it's bleeding to death, and it's like, now I'm going to fight. You're like, perfect. You do that.
Well,
my worst Uber is not anywhere close to my worst cab drive.
I have a real problem with monopolies and duopolies where the market doesn't have the voice it needs to have. And I love that the power is being shifted back into the hands of the market. And I like watching what happens with that. And I'm hopeful that the powers that be are going to respond accordingly to that, and we'll be leaner, and even cities and public sector environments are going to get smarter about things like how people move from A to B, about civic planning, about building.
I've got one startup, Benti, and they're helping with adoptions, and they've cut the amount of labor it takes for the government to put an adoption through in half.
That's wonderful.
So it's happening everywhere.
We've got one that we looked at yesterday that is, I think, finally cracked the code to be a real-time baby monitoring wearable from birth and beyond, to measure vital signs and breathing and even sounds so that you could tell if your babysitter's hitting your child. It's incredible. And the idea that because it's so inexpensive to mass produce, that this could be in every take-home bag for every new mother. Yeah. And what that can do to save lives.
Or even monitoring yourself. Why don't I know how efficiently my heart's working? Like, why do I have to wait till I have a heart attack?
Well, you have the watch. Don't you check your heartbeat on that?
Yeah, but it's just, I don't think it.
It's not going to tell him he's going to have a heart attack.
Yeah.
That's true.
And
we both of our fathers have had heart attacks recently. And so
Does that technology exist already?
It does. It's just not widespread enough. We have one life detection group that can measure the surface area of your heart remotely with a magnetic wave without even touching you.
Wow.
And that will eventually be integrated into all of your car seats. So it'll know how hard to deploy the airbag based on the size and weight of the person. It'll know if you're falling asleep when you're driving, if you're nodding off. It will be in mattresses, in cribs. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, that's crazy. We talk to a lot of influencers that write about the future. We recently had a conversation with Jeremiah O. Yang, and he was talking about autonomous vehicles and all of the markets that are going to be disrupted because of autonomous vehicles.
It's the single largest change in our society. It is as different as a horse is to a car to an autonomous vehicle.
Right.
and it will change parking lot. I mean, you go through the list.
Everything.
It's everything everywhere that affects humanity.
We spend 3% of our time, I believe, in a vehicle, yet it's 20% of our income goes towards it. It's a very disproportionate number. My children are 14 and 13. I think they're the last generation to intentionally get driver's licenses for anything other than pure pleasure.
Yeah. And I've noticed, I work on a transportation-based committee, and I've noticed, I can't tell you how many guardrails that have been smashed. And, you used to never, ever see the sand barrels on the off-ramp crushed. I see that once a week now, a new site where someone has made a bad choice. Yeah. Somehow distracted, whether they were on their phone or brushing their teeth or whatever they were. But I've hundreds of times now in the past year, I've seen like, oh my God, what is going on, And that's all going to hopefully go away. I mean, cars have already gotten tremendously safer, but now if we have somebody else driving, we can do the other things that we obviously want to do instead of drive.
Well, think about it. It's the second leading cause of death.
Right.
And I'll just use an example, and not that I want to veer into politics, but if you take the amount of money spent on the Middle East and trying to control the Middle East, and if you put that into autonomous vehicles and no one ever had to die in a car wreck again, like that's a big deal. Now it's coming anyway because I think it's, being pushed by factors everywhere, but it's interesting. People focus many times on scary stuff, not the stuff that's actually going to happen to them, like a heart attack or, cancer or getting hit while they're driving their car, or, it's the normal things that happen so often you've already discarded them as something I have to pay attention to.
And today was a big indicator. Fortune just released that for the first time ever, the 5 most valuable companies in the world are all tech. Facebook just displaced Exxon. So you've got Google, Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, and Amazon are the 5 most valuable companies in the world. And do any of them actually manufacture anything? Right.
I remember in the 90s when Jeff Bezos was buying up everything, dog medicine companies, everything. And the people in the industry, they're like, this company isn't worth anything. What are you doing? And it's like, don't you get it?
I quit saying that about 5 years in. I'm like, I just won't bet against this guy.
Yeah, don't bet against him.
And even that part I got. Okay, great. You're going to sell books online. I get it. But the name Amazon? What the hell? There was an article today. He's going to be featured in 60 Minutes, I think, or just was. And there was an additional excerpt that they cut from the episode that talked about how he raised his money. He raised $1 million. He had to do 60 meetings. He got 22 investors at just under an average of $50,000 per check. And every meeting started the same way. What's this internet thing?
Amazing. Well, is there anything else that you guys want to talk about? What does the future hold for GrowthX?
So our big vision is that we want to create a global network of funders, entrepreneurs, and talent. And so we started on the fund side. We raised our first fund. We've made investments. We've, helped companies grow. The next part of that vision is GrowthX Academy. We're going to do this in the 30 largest startup cities on the planet. And we're going to create a talent network around the world. Because if you think about it, how you would go to market and sell a product is going to be different in Japan than it is in America, than it is in the United Kingdom. So we need talent all around the world so that as entrepreneurs come to us with ideas, we can tap into talent in the markets that they want to expand into and grow into.
Yeah, because our 2 guiding principles are products don't create value, customers do. And we don't think entrepreneurs should have to leave their home, customers, and support system to be successful. We built our companies in other markets, right? We came here for that same reason. Other people come here. People shouldn't have to come to the most expensive city in the world because they're capitalists.
Right.
They can stay home and build their company. And you can do it with quality talent in very small chunks in markets like where he's from, Jackson, Mississippi. There's 7 companies a year that are fundable out of there. If we have a school that graduates 10 to 20 people a year that could work in those companies, and we have a partner down there who's investing and helping them grow, it's a win.
Absolutely. That's a very exciting vision. And I love what you guys are doing for startups and helping them grow and, really just, determine what's going to make for success. So amazing job. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us on. It was awesome.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, we'll have to do this again.
Great conversation.
Look forward to it.